Hello. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, everyone, to Cocktails and Conversations with Intent and the New York Times. Please welcome David Gellis, Managing Correspondent of Climate Forward at the New York Times, and Alexandre De Croo, Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme and former Prime Minister of Belgium. Thank you.
Thank you all. Welcome, Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you very much for being here.
Good evening. I mean, these are the ones who really do not want to go home.
These are the ones who really don't want to go home. We're here to talk about substantial issues, and there's much to discuss. This is going to be a lightning round because it's been a long day for all of us. Yet there is, as I said, so much in the air right now. You wear many hats. You are part of the head of the United Nations Development Program. We're going to talk about that work briefly. You, of course, were the Prime Minister of Belgium. And I think critically, for this conversation, you're a European. And I think on a day like today, when my president came here after weeks of rhetoric and delivered a very strong message to the world, but especially the European community, I have to ask how you, as a European, as the head of the UNDP, as the former Prime Minister of Belgium, received the remarks we all heard this afternoon.
All right, here we go.
Here we go.
I think we all need the F to cool down.
Okay.
Everyone needs to cool down. And that was also, I saw half of the speech. I was in meetings, but I saw part of it. And, you know, everyone is reacting in such a direct, immediate way.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw before the speech, like there's hundreds of people trying to get in there. And I was like, this is like rabbits that are looking into the headlights. And like, oh, we have to be there. And you know, I mean, there's a saying in Dutch that often the soup is not eaten at the temperature it's put on the table. And that was the case.
Will you explain that for those of us who aren't Dutch?
I'm Belgian, I'm not Dutch. But it's Flemish. No, what it means is that, yes, very often if you react immediately to quotes, to speeches, that leads to a lot of excitement. Yeah. And I think what we saw today, what is the most important is what happened like half an hour ago, where basically the president said, well, you know, in his speech, he said, we're not going to invade Greenland. Yeah. Honestly, I never believed that they were ever invaded, but fine. There's different opinions on that. And then he said, well, you know, the tariffs, I'm not going to do this because I'm happy with the action that NATO is going to do. And this has always been the way I looked at it, is that the Americans have legitimate concerns related to security in the Arctic. Yeah. And the Danish have from day one said, we hear you. If you want to have more military presence in Greenland, we're totally fine with that. Yeah. That was, to me, the basis. All the rest, I always thought it was noise, and looks like it was noise. And in the end, I mean, government leaders, you can think whatever you want about government leaders, but in general, it's quite rational people. Mm-hmm. Of course, they need to please the press, which is part of the job.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah. And there's a lot of rhetoric and a lot of excitement, but in the end, it's back to rational decisions. And I think the end of the day is an example of a very rational decision.
Yeah. So I think you're bringing up a really interesting point, if I may read between the lines, which is that as a result of all this rhetoric around Greenland, we have seen NATO agree to step up some of its security posture in the Arctic. This is the question. Do you believe that President Trump's critiques of Europe, his pressure on Europe with tariffs and with other political means, is a good thing in any way? Is it making Europe evolve in some healthy direction?
I have to be a bit prudent here. I mean, the moment I took over the job at UNDP, someone came to me and said, you know, you're not European anymore. Now you have to take distance. And so don't want to be here discussing European politics too much. But if you want NATO to function, and if you want NATO to function well, NATO functions well when it stands on two legs. And honestly speaking, the last decades, it was more standing on one leg than on two legs. Yeah. And that European countries are stepping up in defense investments, I think it's a logical thing. Yeah. I just hope it's not only defense. Mm-hmm. And that relating it to my domain now is, Look, the global debate is concentrating on defense and on migration flows and on fighting illegal drug trade and on extremism. And to me, all these are legitimate topics. But these are symptoms. These are symptoms of an underlying issue. And the underlying issue is extreme poverty and is extreme income disparity in some regions in the world. And there's a calculation made by the IMF that shows that investing in preventing that, for example, investing in inclusive economic growth throughout the world, is 16 times cheaper than having to deal with the consequences afterwards.
Yeah. Humans don't always have the best record of preventative investments, though. And I want to bridge the conversation about the U.S. and the world with your work at the UNDP. And this is the way. One of the first things that President Trump did in his very first months in office was gut USAID. Huge volumes of outgoing U.S. foreign aid evaporated overnight. We at the New York Times have been tracking the impacts of that, and we can say factually, it has been catastrophic. Yep. Vulnerable communities around the globe. So I'm curious, as you do your work, leading UNDP, what are you observing firsthand from the effects of the U.S. withdrawal of foreign aid?
Well, the effects are direct for hundreds of thousands of people, and these are the most vulnerable people in the world. Now, and we can talk a bit more about the cuts in what we call ODA, Official Development Assistance. Approximately 25% of it has disappeared in a space of 2 years' time. But you know what also has an impact on the most vulnerable in the world is the fact that if you look at the growth numbers of worldwide economy, and there were new projections coming out, it's around 3%. This is the lowest growth number since the 1960s. And there's a good reason for that. And the reason is because of uncertainty, fragility, and instability. Yeah. Because if you want people to invest, if you want households to invest, to consume, this dramatic uncertainty is really plumbing that. And the impact of low growth, you could say, well, you know, the Western world feels it. Yes, we feel it. But the poorest parts of the world, they feel it 10 times more. And so I could only hope that next to investing a bit more in development, we could also get back to a world where the great powers talk with each other, understands that, you know, international humanitarian law, the international system, it has its merits. And that even if you are the strongest power in the world, it's always good to have friends.
But with all respect, it feels like we are careening away from that kind of a world order. I mean, it feels like we are moving from an age of relative stability among the great powers to this new age of uncertainty that we've all been talking about all week.
I would say right now. And that's the good thing about politics, is that things change. And sometimes it changes fast. And look, yes, I have no argument against when you say it's going in the right direction. That's totally true. It's just that sometimes, at some point, people change their mind. Yeah. Just like the tariffs on Greenland, for example. I mean, changing your mind is not a bad thing, especially if you're going in a direction which I think is not to the benefit of anyone. I mean, being isolated in the world is not a good thing. And there is this, we have this, this World Confidence Report that is made by Edelman that just came out, like here. I mean, this is quite dramatic, what you see there. For example, what you would call nationalistic consumerism. Look at the Canadians. The Canadians, very clear, completely taking distance from any American product. And you see that I mean, the consumption will have a dramatic hit. Huge disparity in the United States between the top quarter and the bottom quarter, or how they look at life. I mean, all these things are happening under the waterline. I'm convinced that at some point that will have an influence. And many people have said it, but I mean, the midterms in the United States, let's see what happens. Look, I've been way too far into politics. Let's talk about development now.
Okay. Well, but as you said earlier, and I think you were the one who acknowledged this, it's all related. I mean, the development work is happening in part because of the geopolitical instability. So let's not pretend for a second that this isn't all one big conversation. Let me bring it back, and I want to let everyone continue with their evenings. Perhaps the final question. If the U.S. is withdrawing its funds, if Europe is refocusing on defense, where is the capital for this kind of important development work going to come from? And of course, we're here in Davos, where we have both the public sector, the private sector. I'm going to keep that, there we go. Not at all. Where will it come from, if not the historical governments that have supported this work?
So a few things. First of all, yes, there is less public funding going into development. And sometimes we used to say, well, you know, you will do more with less. No, we will do less with less. And so there's a part of people that do need this that will not be served. But we'll do less with less, but I hope to do better, to do it at better quality. That's the first element. Second element, there's two reasons to be optimistic. The first one is access to technology. I mean, the access to technology has never been easier than today, and many technologies that needed quite some subsidies until 5 years ago, today don't need that at all. Yeah. For example, fighting climate change, photovoltaic cells these days, you can make, that's a sound economic investment without subsidy basically almost everywhere in the world. Access to artificial intelligence is going to have a huge impact in the effectiveness of some of the policies that we have. And we see that those places in the world that have the greatest needs actually are quite eager to adopt that technology, often have a younger population that is much, much better at it. That's first reason to be optimistic. Yep. Second reason to be optimistic is that, yes, there's less public finance, that's true. But there's no lack of capital in the world. There's actually more capital than ever in the world that today is sitting there and is looking for a decent return. Yeah. And if you look at the fundamentals for investing in the Western world are not very attractive. I mean, the demographics are actually really against it. And these are societies which are quite set. I mean, it's not that easy to have big societal breakthroughs here. The fundamentals of the least developed countries in the world are actually quite attractive. I mean, the demographics are totally attractive. The needs are totally there. Now, you would say, why is that capital not flowing there? Well, it's not flowing there for a few reasons. One of them is risk. Yep. Second one is perceived risk. There's a big difference between the real risk and the perceived risk, but also lack of rule of law, lack of financial stability, and so on. Now, these are things you can fix. Yeah. I mean, these are things where, and especially UNDP, this is at the core of what we do. And the UN has had in the past a habit of looking at the World Bank and the multilateral banks and basically blaming them for the fact that they're not investing. I disagree with that. I mean, if the World Bank is not investing, it's because certain criteria are not met. So instead of blaming them and finger-pointing them, our approach now is, okay, we understand you're not investing because of these and these reasons. Give us a few months to work on those fundamentals, and we'll try some countries to do reforms that make them ready for those types of investment. It used to be that private investment, entrepreneurship and so on was peripheral to economic growth in developing countries. I'm convinced that it's really at the core. Yeah. And I'm not saying, I'm not naive. I mean, the private sector is not going to do everything. Investing in basic healthcare, investing in education, the private sector is not going to do that. But if you have an environment where, especially local entrepreneurs, where you create a middle class, where you have economic growth, where jobs are being created, where people pay taxes. Paying taxes is one of the basic elements of development, because if they pay taxes to a government, governments can steer their own development. One of the main reasons why development has not always been very successful is because of a lack of local ownership. If you don't have local ownership, if you don't have local politicians who say, I have political skin in the game, a lot of the projects we do are actually not very successful.
The future of development, taxes. Okay, two very quick final questions.
It's good that I stopped with national politics because
two very quick final questions. And you just touched on these issues, so I'm going to ask you really just to distill it right now. I'll give you a preview. The first question is, what keeps you up at night? What are you really worried about? And we may have touched on it, we may have not. And the second question, I'll let you think about it in the back of your mind, is what are you most hopeful about? Just very briefly, what's keeping you up at night right now?
I think what's waking me up is we are moving into a world of power is might, right? And being powerful entitles you to do whatever you want, basically. Yeah. And there's reasons to believe that this is temporary, but accidents happen. And you know, the multilateral system, the UN, was created after the Second World War. And it has enabled so many of the small and the medium-sized countries, and let's say that Belgium is not a small country, let's call ourselves medium-sized. I mean, how did we survive? When you have neighbors such as France, Germany, the UK, and the Netherlands, we like them quite a bit. But when you have big neighbors, well, you know, it's good to have a system that, and countries with no natural resources, I mean, the only natural resource we have is our brains and our talent. That's how we survived. That's how we became prosperous. And so that worries me, because there's many reasons to believe it's temporary, but yeah, who knows? What am I optimistic about? I think the potential of AI is gigantic. And look, it's the first time I think up to now, I was always, with every technology, I was always had the feeling like, I master this. I kind of understand how this thing works. AI is a bit different. I mean, I understand the basics, but I mean, the examples you see, I mean, every month you're like, wow, this is pretty amazing. And there's many reasons why people look at it with a certain fear. I don't share that fear. I mean, to me, it's a tool. It's a very, very powerful tool. Will it shift where we human beings have our value added? Yes, definitely it will shift. I mean, having this tool to lift people out of poverty in the world, it's one of the things that makes me the most hopeful.
Thank you. Well, just before this event, I moderated the New York Times debate, and the motion was, AI will succeed where humans have failed. And I regret to inform you that the team arguing against the motion won the debate. So we will see. Prime Minister De Croo, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Well done. Thank you.
You left the big elephant in the room. Corporations have a lot more.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you. Well, he addressed it. We talked about it.
Overseas development assistance is one thing. ODA is only 223 people, right? You know how much you would get if everybody in the membership shared 10 cents per cup? 300 million a day would be